I already told you 3 times. I want the membership canceled today. I stood in the home decor aisle at Target, staring at the screen of the shared family iPad. The automated voice on the line didn't care that I was annoyed. It just kept looping through the same 3 options for gym cancellations in that upbeat, useless tone. The store blurred around me, just bright white lights and the screech of cartwheels on linoleum. I held the iPad in one hand and pressed my phone to my ear, shifting my weight. My thumb swiped across the tablet screen while I looked for the grocery list Robert promised to update. Instead, a notification popped up. A system alert about a failed cloud backup. I was bored and frustrated waiting for a human to pick up, so I tapped it. I navigated into the settings. I found a folder tucked away in a hidden backup directory labeled Archive 2023. I didn't recognize it. Robert handles all the tech in the house, and he always told me the iPad was just for the kids and shared lists. I looked around to make sure no one watched me. Then I tapped the folder. It was mostly empty, but I saw a series of screenshots. One was a map. A location ping from 3 weeks ago placed Robert's phones at a small, nondescript storefront in a part of town he had no reason to visit. When I asked him about it last Tuesday, he didn't even look up from his laptop. He just shrugged and said he took a detour to meet a client for coffee. It sounded plausible. He's a busy man, and in a Westchester commuter town, everyone rushes everywhere to maintain the image of success. Our property taxes are practically a second mortgage. The pressure to keep up, the private school tuition, the manicured lawns, the silent competition among the moms, creates this constant, low-humming anxiety. I've spent the last 5 years trying to keep our heads above water, while Robert climbed the corporate ladder. Then Buster, our golden retriever, had an emergency trip to the clinic for an intestinal blockage. The vet bill hit $200. That money came directly out of the account we'd just replenished after paying the quarterly tax bill. I felt a pinch of panic in my chest. I spent the whole morning rearranging the budget in my head, trying to figure out which subscription to cut or which dinner party to decline. Usually, I make excuses for Robert. When he's short with me, I tell myself he's just stressed. When he forgets an anniversary or stays late at the office for a project, I convince myself that the financial security he provides makes the emotional distance worth it. It's easier to be practical than to be hurt. The gym bot finally connected me to a representative, but I stopped listening. The woman started her script, her voice sounding tinny and distant. I didn't even realize I had muted her. I scrolled further down into that backup folder and found a PDF. It was an exported email thread. I felt a heavy sinking feeling in my stomach. Robert had addressed the email to a man named Marcus Thorne, a family law attorney, specializing in high-asset divorces. I read the text like it was a car crash in slow motion. Robert wasn't just consulting a lawyer, he was coordinating a strategy. He asked about the best way to protect certain assets before filing. He mentioned liquidating non-essential heirlooms to create a separate cash reserve that wouldn't be subject to a 50-50 split. I thought about the mahogany jewelry box my grandmother left me. It had sat on my dresser for a decade. A few months ago, Robert offered to get it cleaned and appraised, claiming he wanted to make sure it was properly insured. He returned it 2 weeks later and told me the appraiser said it wasn't worth much more than the existing coverage. I looked at the iPad again. The email mentioned a specific timeline. He wanted everything moved and converted by the end of the month. The representative on the phone kept talking, asking if I was still there and if I wanted to proceed with the cancellation. I didn't answer. I stood there in the Target aisle, surrounded by overpriced throw pillows and scented candles, staring at the evidence that my husband was planning a life that didn't include me. I pressed the end call button. I locked the screen and put the iPad back in my bag. As I walked toward the checkout, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Robert's mother. Robert mentioned he's been feeling very overwhelmed lately, Christina. I hope you're being supportive. He really needs a peaceful home right now. I stared at the message. Then, I opened the banking app and checked the joint savings account. The balance was lower than it had been yesterday. I noticed a few $1,000 more had vanished, and no withdrawal or transfer appeared in the history. I walked out to the parking lot. The humid New York air hit me like a wall. I sat in the driver's seat and opened the glove box, pulling out the folder where I kept the property tax records and the mortgage statements. I began to flip through the pages looking for anything that didn't add up. A coffee spill from 3 months ago had smudged the ink on the corner of the mortgage statement. I squinted against the afternoon sun hitting the windshield and ran my finger down the column of figures. The numbers didn't lie, but they didn't give me the full picture either. My ledger, the spiral notebook, where I track every cent of our life here in Westchester, showed a joint savings balance nearly $4,000 higher than what the app showed me while I was at Target. I sat there for a few minutes and just stared at the gap. I don't make mistakes with the budget. I can't. Between the private school tuition and properties that feel like a second mortgage, one wrong decimal point means we're eating generic cereal for a month. Then there was Buster's emergency vet bill. Another $1,200 that had already gutted my checking account. I couldn't just absorb a $4,000 disappearance. I pulled into the driveway and saw Robert's car. He was home early. The house looked perfect, with a lawn manicured to a degree that felt aggressive. It's the kind of curb appeal the other moms in the neighborhood use as a weapon. I climbed out of the car, clutched the folder, and walked inside. The air conditioning hummed, providing some relief from the humidity, but the silence in the kitchen felt heavy. Robert stood by the island and scrolled through his phone. He didn't look up when I entered. "Hey," I said, setting my keys on the granite counter with a sharp clack. "Hey," he replied. His voice sounded flat. He still didn't look up. I stood there, my heart racing. I wanted to scream about the emails and the lawyer, but I knew that would be a mistake. If he knew I'd seen the Archive 2023 folder, he'd just lock everything down. I had to be practical. "The joint savings account is down," I said. I tried to keep my voice steady. "About $4,000. I saw the statements in the car and the app. Where did it go?" Robert finally looked up. He didn't look guilty. He looked annoyed. He sighed. A long, slow exhale that seemed to suck all the air out of the room. He set his phone face down and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "I don't know, Christina," he said. "Maybe it was an automatic pull for the quarterly taxes or insurance." I checked the history. "Robert, there's no record of a withdrawal. It's just gone." He shifted his weight and turned toward the fridge for a bottle of water. He didn't look at me. "Look, I've had a brutal day. I can't come home to a financial interrogation. You're overthinking this. It's probably a banking glitch or something I handled and forgot to mention." "A $4,000, maybe," he muttered, taking a long drink. "I can't remember every single move. I'm overwhelmed, Chris. My head is spinning from the merger talks at work." He stepped closer, using that look of tired disappointment he employs whenever I push too hard. "My mother texted me today. She's worried about me. She thinks I'm under too much pressure. And she's right. I just need a peaceful home right now. Not a trial." The mention of his mother made me freeze. She had sent me a text earlier about being supportive and creating a peaceful home. It felt like a coordinated attack. It made me feel small, like I was the one causing the stress just by noticing the money was gone. For a moment, I actually wondered if I was being neurotic. Maybe I had missed a transfer. Maybe I was spiraling because of the vet bill. "I'm not putting you on trial," I whispered. "I just want to know where the money is." "I'll look into it this weekend," he said, already turning away. "I'm taking a shower." I watched him walk down the hallway. As soon as the bathroom door clicked shut and the shower started, I moved. I didn't go for the iPad. I went for the filing cabinet in the den. It was a boring beige metal box filled with the debris of a 20-year marriage. Old passports, vaccine records, and folders of home improvement receipts. I pulled out the insurance files. I wasn't looking for a confession. I wanted a paper trail. In the home assets folder, I found the appraisal for my grandmother's mahogany jewelry box. Robert had given me a printed copy a few months ago after he'd taken it for cleaning. I held it up to the light. The letterhead said Heritage Valuations, but the layout looked off. The font was inconsistent, and the document listed no physical address, only a website and a generic email. I remembered the jewelry box, sitting on my dresser. When he'd brought it back, I hadn't even opened it to check the contents. I'd just been relieved to have it. I'd assumed the pieces were the same. But I hadn't checked the hallmarks on the gold or the clarity of the stones. I'd trusted him. My hands shook as I dug deeper into the folder. I found a list of household valuables Robert had compiled for the insurance company last year. It was a meticulous spreadsheet. Beside the entry for the jewelry box, I saw a handwritten note in Robert's scrawl. Converted to liquid reserve, Oct 14. I stared at the words. He hadn't just appraised it. He'd written, in his own hand, that he'd converted it to a liquid reserve. The shower stopped running upstairs. The silence that followed was absolute. I shoved the paper back into the folder and slammed the cabinet drawer shut, just as I heard him calling my name from the top of the stairs. I stood there in the dim light of the den, my heart racing, looking at the beige metal cabinet. I didn't have a lawyer and I didn't have the money. All I had was a smudge of ink on a mortgage statement and a handwritten note in a boring folder. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a group text from the PTA board about the upcoming silent auction. I didn't open it. Listening to Robert walk back down the hall. I slipped the folder back into the beige cabinet and shut the drawer just as Robert stepped into the den. He wore his gray robe, his hair still damp from the shower. He looked exactly like the exhausted corporate executive he is. "In here?" he asked. He didn't look at me. He just walked over to the bookshelf and started straightening novels that weren't even crooked. "I was looking for the 1098 form for the property taxes," I said. I lied, and my voice sounded thin. "I think I left it in the insurance file." Robert stopped moving. He turned his head slightly and scanned the room before landing on me. "You're obsessed with that paperwork, Chris. Just relax. I told you I'd handle the balance this weekend." He walked past me. He smelled like sandalwood soap. He didn't touch my shoulder or kiss my cheek. He just vanished back into the hallway. I stood there in the dim light with my heart hammering against my ribs. The next hour felt like a blur of forced normalcy. I made pasta and a salad, while Robert sat at the table with his laptop. He had that specific furrow in his brow that usually meant a merger crisis. I kept glancing at the mahogany jewelry box on my dresser in the other room. It looked the same, but I knew the gold inside was likely plated brass, and the diamonds were probably cubic zirconia. He had liquidated my grandmother's legacy to build a war chest for a divorce he hadn't even filed for yet. While I stirred the pasta, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother-in-law. She wanted to know why Robert sounded strained on the phone earlier. She told me that Robert carries the entire financial weight of the family on his shoulders, and that I needed to stop stressing him out with my little anxieties about the budget. I stared at the screen, feeling that familiar surge of doubt. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe I was just imagining the tension. I didn't reply. I just put the phone face down on the granite counter. The stress was real, though. We had just drained the checking account to cover the property taxes, and then Buster had an emergency vet visit that cost me $1,200. I was calculating how to cover the grocery bill for the next 2 weeks, while Robert acted like the money didn't exist. The actual proof didn't come in a dramatic confrontation. It happened on Thursday afternoon. I needed the homeowner insurance policy for the town assessor, so I started digging through a plastic bin of miscellaneous files in the back of the guest closet. Robert never goes in there because it's too cluttered. I found a faded manila envelope labeled Old Utilities 2018. Inside, I found a thick stack of printed emails and a handwritten ledger. It wasn't my ledger. Robert kept this one. It contained a series of dates, amounts, and a name. I stared at the name, Erica. Erica was Robert's brother-in-law, his sister's husband. He worked in private equity and always had a little something. I'd always found him slimy, but he was family. As I scrolled through the printed emails, the pieces clicked together. That nondescript storefront from the location, Ping. The one Robert claimed was just a coffee meeting, was a high-end asset liquidator. He hadn't been meeting a client. He had been selling my jewelry. The emails between Robert and Erica weren't about a divorce strategy. They were talking about the arrangement. "The payments to Sarah are becoming unsustainable," Robert wrote in one email. "If she keeps pushing for more, the liquid reserves from the heirlooms won't cover it. We need a new plan to keep her quiet." Erica's response was clipped. "Robert, I told you. She doesn't care about the money as much as the recognition. But as long as the check's clear, she stays in the shadows. If she goes public with the truth about your father, you don't just lose the house, you lose the firm. Just keep the payments consistent." I sat down on the floor of the guest closet. The scent of mothballs and old paper filled my nose. I had never heard of a Sarah. I dug deeper into the envelope and found a photocopy of a birth certificate from 35 years ago. Robert's father was listed as the father. I didn't recognize the mother. Robert didn't have a mistress. He had a secret half-sister. The liquid reserves. Rent for a divorce lawyer. They were hush money. Robert and Erica coordinated a secret payroll to keep Sarah from revealing that their father had a second family. That secret would have incinerated the legacy image Robert's father spent decades building in the New York business world. A cold numbness washed over me. It wasn't the sharp pain of betrayal. It was logistical. I thought about the $4,000 missing from the savings. I thought about the $1,200 vet bill for Buster. While I stressed over dog food and property tax exemptions, my husband and his brother-in-law laundered family heirlooms to pay off a secret sibling. I stood up and walked to the kitchen. I took my phone and photographed the birth certificate, the ledger, and every single email in that envelope. I uploaded them to a private cloud account I'd created 10 minutes earlier. Robert didn't have the password. The garage door opened. Robert was home. I walked into the foyer just as he stepped inside with his briefcase. He looked tired. He loosened his tie and looked irritated. "Did you find the insurance policy?" he asked. He didn't look at me as he kicked off his shoes. "I'm still looking," I said. I kept my voice flat. "I think it's in the attic." He sighed, a short, sharp sound. "This house is a disaster. I don't know how you spend all day here and can't find a single piece of paper." He walked past me toward the stairs. He didn't notice that I held my phone tightly in my hand or that I stared at the back of his head with total detachment. I went back to the guest closet and put the envelope exactly where I found it. I didn't want him to know I knew. Not yet. If he knew the secret was out, he'd move the rest of the money and probably vanish with the kids. I spent the rest of the evening in the kitchen, staring at my spiral notebook. I opened it to the joint savings page and drew a neat, hard line through the balance. Underneath it, I wrote a new number, 0. In my mind, that money was already gone. Around 9 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from Erica Z. Davis. "Hey Robert, just checking in on the Q4 transfers. Sarah's getting restless. Let me know when it's sent." Erica sent the message to Robert, but we had a shared family iPad synced to the same iCloud account in the living room. The notification popped up on the screen while I folded laundry. I looked at the screen, then at Robert. He was asleep on the sofa with the TV humming in the background. I didn't wake him up. I picked up the iPad, deleted the notification, and went back to folding the kids' socks. Folding those socks felt like the only thing I could actually control. The laundry basket was nearly empty, but my head was spinning with the math of it all. I didn't wake Robert up. I just sat there in the dim light of the living room, listening to the TV hum and watching the slow rise and fall of his chest. He looked so peaceful, which only made the coldness in my gut harden. I waited 4 days before I said a word. During those 4 days, I stopped asking about the budget. I stopped complaining about the property taxes. I just watched him. It was strange how quickly the air changed when I stopped pushing. Robert actually started being nice to me again. He brought me coffee in bed. He asked how my day was. He was treating me like a partner because he thought the threat was gone, not realizing I was just documenting the silence. The confrontation happened on a Tuesday afternoon. Robert was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter and checking his watch, probably timing his exit for a gym session. I didn't make a scene. I just laid the printed emails and the photocopy of Sarah's birth certificate on the granite island, right next to his keys. He looked down at the papers, then looked at me. His face didn't go pale, it just went blank. He didn't even try to deny it at first. He just stood there, his hand hovering over his watch. "Look," he started, his voice sounding breathless, like he'd just run a mile. "It wasn't about the money, Chris. It was about the family. My father's reputation, the firm, I couldn't let it all burn down." "You sold my grandmother's jewelry to pay for a secret," I said. My voice sounded distant, like I was listening to someone else speak. "You let me stress over a $1,200 vet bill while you were funding a hush money payroll." Robert shifted his weight and looked toward the pantry. "I mean, honestly, I was going to tell you. Eventually. I just needed to get the arrangement stable first. The arrangement, I let the words sit there. And Erica, how long has he been your accountant for this? Robert rubbed the back of his neck. Erica he has the connections. He knew how to move the money without it flagging the joint accounts. He was just trying to help me protect the legacy. I didn't feel the need to argue. I just told him that the evidence was already in a cloud folder, and that I'd already spoken to a lawyer. The look on his face wasn't heartbreak. It was calculation. He immediately reached for his phone, probably to call Erica or Sarah to get ahead of the narrative. That was when the collapse actually started. Robert spent the next hour frantically texting Sarah, trying to negotiate a new payment schedule. Know that the secret was out of the bag. He thought he could still manage her, that she'd stay quiet if he promised her a larger lump sum from some other asset. But Sarah had been on the receiving end of Robert's management for years. She didn't want a new schedule. She wanted a way out. While Robert was pacing the kitchen, his phone pinged. Then it went silent. He tried to call her 3 times in a row. Each time, it went straight to voicemail. She blocked me, he whispered. He looked genuinely stunned. Then came the text from Erica. I saw the notification on the counter. Robert, this is a liability I can't be attached to. Don't call me. My lawyer will handle the wind down of the transfers. We're done. In the span of 20 minutes, Robert's entire support system, the slimy brother-in-law and the secret sister, had decided he was a sinking ship. He had spent years treating Sarah like a problem to be paid off, and Erica like a tool to be used. And the second he lost his grip on the narrative, they both cut the line. He was left standing in our high-end kitchen, completely alone, with no one to protect his legacy, but himself. The weeks that followed were a blur of logistical friction. The house felt different. Still expensive, still manicured, but the silence was no longer heavy, it was just empty. We stayed in the same house for a few months because neither of us wanted to deal with the nightmare of selling a Westchester property in the middle of the school year. The pressure shifted from emotional to purely financial. The property tax bill came due again, and for the first time, Robert didn't try to handle it. He just sat at the table and stared at the statement. I ended up paying it using the remaining funds from an old inheritance account he didn't know about. I didn't tell him. I just let him feel the weight of the debt he'd created. Our social circle didn't implode, which was the most frustrating part. The other moms at the private school still invited me to brunch. They didn't care about the secret sister or the pawn jewelry. They only cared if the kids were still in the top percentile of their classes. I went to the meetings. I smiled. I played the part of the stable wife while we divided our lives into spreadsheets. The emotional abuse stopped, mostly because Robert stopped caring enough to be critical. He didn't comment on my little anxieties anymore. He didn't tell me I was obsessing over paperwork. He just existed in the house like a ghost, moving from the bedroom to the office without making eye contact. Co-parenting became a series of sterile emails. I'll pick up the kids at 4. Buster needs his medication at 6 call. It was exhausting, but it was predictable. The chaos was gone, replaced by a cold, functioning routine. The final decree came in a standard manila envelope. I didn't open it with a flourish or call a friend to celebrate. I just sat at the kitchen island, signed the last page, and walked over to the beige filing cabinet in the den. I opened the drawer and filed it next to the electric bills. Thank you so much, Christina, for trusting us and sharing your story with the community. I can only imagine the cold numbness she must have felt, discovering that Robert Mitchell and his brother-in-law, Erica Z. Davis, were treating her family's legacy like a slush fund for a secret half-sister. To be gaslit about having little anxieties while they were actively laundering her heirlooms is absolutely heartbreaking. What really stands out to me is the ending. How their social circle in that Dallas subdivision didn't even blink at the scandal, as long as the children stayed in the top percentile of their classes. It makes you wonder about the true cost of maintaining an image. Do you think Christina made the right choice by playing the part of the stable wife and keeping the peace for the sake of the kids? Or should she have exposed the truth to their entire social circle to let the legacy truly burn? We want to hear from you. Leave your thoughts and your best advice for Christina in the comments below. If you found this story gripping, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a confession. We'll see you in the next one.